study and that it used an incorrect millage rate. So let's hear what we can from both groups about really what this thing is going to cost. So let me start with La Vista Hills proponents. If you can really give us a clear picture of addressing that inadvertent error by the Carl Vinson Institute. What are we looking at here? Is it feasible?
It's most certainly is, Representative Holcomb. I would have to differ with the characterization of this as an error. What the Carl Vinson Institute study is essentially like a crash test or a stress test that under the worst possible circumstances, in its first year, when a new city has new capital expenses, would it be able to operate at a surplus? If you take the analysis that was performed by a single anti-cityhood activist and apply it back to the feasibility studies for Dunwoody and for Brookhaven, it would have shown that both of those cities would have been operating at a deficit as well. When we know in the case of Dunwoody, for example, that analysis and that methodology would have shown that Dunwoody was operating at a deficit of about $1.5 million. What the Carl Vinson Institute had projected for it was a surplus of $200,000, but it actually operated in its first year was a surplus of $900,000. The Carl Vinson Institute takes the most conservative possible approach and consistently has applied the millage rates that counties charge, even though cities charge lower taxes, when it's found surpluses on the last 9 cities that it's created in DeKalb and Fulton and Gwinnett. All of those cities are running surpluses. When our opponents talk about the growth of government, what they're really talking about is the growth of the tax base. Dunwoody has been extraordinarily conservative and now has $29 million in reserve, which is almost an entire year's budget. Brookhaven, which has only existed for a couple of years and which would have failed this new methodology that the individual has come out with, has a surplus of $4.6 million sitting there in the bank. That's money that can be used for improved services, that lower taxes, or to simply sit on a rainy day fund. So many of the assumptions involved in that alternative methodology are simply false.
With regard to that, I want to point out, I've spent some time also in the meetings down at the Senate and in the House. The Carl Vinson Institute and the gentleman that drafted it says that it's a snapshot in time. That's all it is a snapshot in time. And at the time that they did the study, things have changed since then, and things will change between now and the time you vote, and things will change between after that. And it could get better, but it could get a lot worse. And there are other ways for cities to get taxes if they need them, and other ways for them to get income if they need them. So that's an issue that has to be addressed by you as well.
And I mean, I just want to say one of the issues, I still have time, okay. I just wanted to say that one of the issues with the Carl Vinson Institute, I am not really sure that there have been different calculations about what taxes they could raise and whether or not the millage rate was set in the right place. There was actually a story on Channel 11 last night that talked about the fact that there was communications at the Carl Vinson Institute where they actually were also very concerned that maybe this might raise taxes, and then there was the statement made that, well, just the less we talk about this, the better. I think that part of the problem is that this whole process was rushed as compared to others. This map was passed about 6 hours after it was drawn on the last day of the session, and the feasibility study was not done for it until after it had already been put on the ballot. And so I think some of these issues, it would have been good if there had been more time to address them, but we did not even have the chance to until after it was a done deal and it was put on the ballot.
Yeah, I actually want to ask a little bit more because the answer is not clear to me, and I vote too. So let's dig just a little deeper if we may. This is my understanding, is that The Carl Vincent Institute used 7.6 for the millage rate, but the proposed charter states 5 for the millage rate, so that's a difference, right? And so that would reduce the potential revenues. The analysis by this person that was conducted, and I don't know if it was right or wrong, I think said that it would have a shortfall of $100,000-ish, right? And then there's a contingency fee of approximately $800,000, which is not specifically applied for the budget. And so if you were to take that money out of there, it would still be potentially net positive. Is that, you can go back and forth in terms of other particulars, but is that a fair summary of what the feasibility study tells us?
It is a fair summary. I would mention that every other city that has been studied by the Carl Vinson Institute has also established a cap below what the county was charging in millage, and that the Carl Vinson Institute has provided the methodology of looking at the money coming into the county, regardless of the cap that was instituted in the city's charter. And so this is not a new methodology, and the alternative analysis also overestimated the number of homes that would be subject to the exemption and failed to take into account the $800,000 additional contingency fund that you mentioned.
And if I could just add a couple of things. First of all, on the, I'm going to admit, we rushed this through in only 3 years. And we didn't have more than about 250 public meetings, and they weren't attended by more than, perhaps some people, I'm sure were more than one, but maybe 6,000 or 8,000 residents coming to those meetings. So yes, we did really rush this through. The other thing, though, on the Carl Vinson Institute, the millage rate difference is in part because the net number is different because the county millage rate is reduced by the host credit in a way that city revenues are not. And so there were some emails that got made public that some of our, citizen supporters were, really upset because when this gentleman with the strong first came forward and said, wait, the Vinson Institute report is wrong. It didn't look at the cap. Frankly, we were flustered. We were upset. We thought, gosh, is that really true? We went back to the Carl Vinson Institute. For those who don't know, it is a branch of the University of Georgia. It's their government studies branch. For 80 years, it has been recognized as the definitive expert in Georgia state and local government and taxation. We went back to them and we said, is this fellow who happens to be a baseball statistician with no background in government finance, is he right? Are we really going to have a failed city from the word go? And they told us, the Carl Vinson Institute of the University of Georgia told us unequivocally that they had looked at his calculation, they were wrong, his calculations were wrong, and that they were sticking by their projection, it's nothing but a projection, that La Vista Hills would be solvent from day one. Now, I know it says stop, but I just want to say, I don't know. I am not in the business of economic projections. I don't know. Maybe he's right and the University of Georgia is wrong, but I know who I trust.
And going back to the Carl Vinson again, as Mr. Baggett stated at the time, as being a snapshot in time of what might be an appropriate amount of money, I'd also like to point out that there are other ways that this study can be evaluated, but not only that, other ways that the city can get money if it turns out the study was wrong. So if you're looking at the study and you vote for the city because you believe that it's going to have plenty of money, and you vote for the city council folks, and they sit down and they look at it, and it's plenty of money, and they choose to spend it how they do, and they don't raise your taxes, that's great. If it's not plenty of money, they're going to raise your millage. And there is always the option to go back to the legislature and ask for the charter to be changed. That 5 mil cap is not written in stone. It can be changed. And I'm not saying anybody would do that, but I want you to know that it's possible. And we are looking at moving targets here. We're looking at what the differences are. The reason that the millage is lower in Dunwoody is because they have nicer homes with more money, they have a higher average income, and they have a tremendous amount of infill and high development. I know I would rather shop at North Lake than spend the 50 minutes it took me to get from Lenox to Perimeter on a regular weekday. And not even mentioning holidays. And Sandy Springs is gonna make it impossible to get to, with their new development, impossible to get to Perimeter. Hope that they are building homes at New Sandy Springs. Is it gonna be live, work, play? Because the government officials are not gonna be able to get there from where they live. So that's where the money's coming from, and that's what makes it viable.
Well, let me just say that if this passes, I'm not voting to support an increase in the millage rate, so we can put that out there. Public safety.